Alright, so I'm not doing well today, and I'm probably going to touch on some morbid topics. So if you're not doing well psychologically, maybe hold off on watching this one until you're feeling a little bit better. Um, yeah, like I don't know if it's that level of whatever, but yeah, just a heads up about that. But so yeah, feeling very down. What happened to set this off is I was watching Xena last night. I'm slowly making my way through that series, like really slowly. I think I watched episode 9, which I think is called Death in Chains, and yeah, it sort of triggered a few things for me. The idea of the story, okay, there's a king, he's trying to achieve immortality, as ancient people do, and he does this by luring Death being this floaty chick with a candle, lures her into a trap and, binds her in chains, takes away her candle, and if the candle burns out, she dies. While she's in chains, no one can die. So there, he's got his immortality is the idea, and he's trying to make it permanent. Meanwhile, Xena and Gabrielle are off on their adventure. They come across all these people who are just like sick and injured and elderly and basically suffering, and a bunch of them by all rights should be dead, but Death has been captured so they can't die, and instead they just keep suffering from their wounds or whatever's wrong with them. So already you can see the theme is like the importance of death as a release from pain and suffering. And like for the most of the show, fine. I was like, yep, I get it, cool. But towards the end, and like this is spoilers, it's a 20 to 30-year-old show at this point, so, come on. Yeah, eventually, they managed to release Death, but along the way, Gabrielle's met this dude, and she's in love with him because he seems perfect. He knows, he's really well educated and very much her type. But it turns out he was actually one of the sick people from that group. The group were trying to get to a hospital, and he pretended to be sort of like a medical guy, but actually he was one of the patients, and he's quite sick. He's been suffering for a long time, and he's pretty much only alive because Death was captured. So at the end, Death is trying to lead him away into the light, and Gabrielle's like, you can't take him, he helped free you and all this kind of stuff, and she's really upset, and he's just trying to reassure her, he's been waiting for this for a long time. He's just been suffering for so long, and she has to let him go. Now, just to lighten the mood for a moment, I think, so, Gabrielle's very upset, tears streaming and all that, because, she finally met, the perfect guy, and he's already dead, essentially. And so she hugs Xena for comfort and, just bawling. But Xena kind of just stands there awkwardly, like she doesn't know what to do with this display of emotion. And I just found that very relatable, because that's kind of me. I think these days I know that you're supposed to at least do the, they're there, Sheldon's here kind of thing. But yeah, that made me that gave me some amusement. But then they're watching Death take this guy into the light, and the trouble for me is having the mental illness. I know the whole show is about the physical pain and suffering and finally getting released from that, but I've had the psychological pain and suffering for a really long time, and this is not my first take at trying to do this video. The first one, I got a little bit more emotional, and then went off on a really tangent, rehashing my life story and shit, so doing a bit better this time around. But yeah, no, I think it just sort of made me kind of jealous. And there were some other scenes as well, earlier on they met this old lady who explained that she was actually in the process of crossing to the other side when Death was captured, and then found herself pulled back into her body, and so she's still suffering from that really old age, unable to do anything. And I think that sort of triggered some of the watching my grandma in the nursing home. That was upsetting as well. I can't feel it now because I think I've blocked it out from my first attempt at doing the video, but yeah, that made me a bit more upset. And yeah, just like all these themes of pain and suffering and the end of it. And like, you know, I've been struggling for so damn long. And so as the guy's walking into the light, I did okay. I held it together, but then something about Xena's facial expression changed as she was watching the guy walk into the light. And like the actress Lucy Lawless, she's actually really brilliant. And I'm just like, holy crap. And I think it's sort of, that's when I lost the composure and went into my depressive spiral as I was going to bed. Talked to a friend on Facebook, my psychology friend, for a bit. And, you know, I mentioned that thing about like Xena's emotional awkwardness. So that sense of humor helped me, you know, helped me pick me up enough to get to bed and not think about it anymore. But then this morning, what happened is, okay, so I've got a disabled brother intellectually, a little bit physically, but mostly intellectually. And I won't rehash too much, but I've essentially got glass child trauma from growing up with him and my parents putting all their energy into him and, you know, thinking that I'm strong enough like glass, but glass actually is quite fragile and glass is see-through, so they look past me, they don't see my needs, and they only see him. That's a summary of glass child trauma. And there's a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm going to try really hard not to rehash things from my life history, because I'm sure I've rambled about it plenty in other vlogs. But yeah, so disabled brother. Today's one of the days he had a carer. I heard the carer arrive around 6. I'm usually awake quite early. I just can't function because I go to bed late. I don't mean to go to bed late, it's just how it is. I think it's partly also because of the situation at home, because if I get up early, there's so much noise and chaos because they're working on his, like, you know, he's really noisy and they're all organizing stuff, and it's just, you know, it's a lot. And when I was, I think when I first got out of high school and didn't have the morning routine anymore, I tried to be a morning person, but then my parents would just make me feed him. And so I was given no incentive to be a morning person once I left school. And then also at nighttime, once my parents go to bed, once he goes to bed and my parents go to bed, it's the only time everything's quiet. And I think that's why I became more of a night person, because I can just chill and no one is harassing me for anything. No one's placing any expectations on me. So I'm a night person. I don't know if that's how I'm meant to be naturally, but because of the situation, my brain has settled into that pattern. Okay, so, but I tend to wake up early and hear all the noise anyway, and toss and turn and eventually drift off. Some days doesn't always work. And then I end up waking up like waking up early, but I end up dragging myself out of bed after quite a lot of time has passed, and I just never have enough energy. But this morning, so yeah, heard her arrive, start looking after him, but then at some point she had to leave the room for whatever reason. I don't know, maybe she went to the bathroom or whatever, but it was for quite a while, and he started yelling, and he has this really annoying yell. Like, you know, babies yelling away to grab your attention, and cats kind of mimic it because they want attention. But he's like, you know, he's an adult male, so he has the male voice box, and he's perfected the art of this annoying kind of noise that just echoes up the hallway. And it's really impossible to tune out. He's just perfected the art of the annoying whine, moan, whatever you want to call it, yelling out. And I yelled back at him, and he just kept yelling. So I went to the bathroom, and then he was still going, so I yelled again. And I think at that point he chilled out, and shortly after someone, either the carer or one of my parents, you know, sorted him out. But by then it was too late, because he'd been yelling for so long, and I'd already been primed by Xena to have gone in this depressive spiral that I just, it kicked all that up again. And, you know, I had a period of feeling depressed recently, but that was an antihistamine, very chemical depression. And in the meantime, I think I've blocked out a lot of this stuff about, you know, my home situation. I haven't really connected with the emotions of it, and I've tried not to think about it too much, and I've tried to focus more on the creative things that I want to do. And so I haven't thought about a lot of this stuff. And then today, everything hits at once. And so I had a really rough morning. And the other thing is, when you're tired, it's a lot harder to control the direction of your thoughts. So like I tried to do breathing exercises, but my brain would still come in with those things and still go on that upset thing. And it's like trying to think of something else, can't control it. It just, I had a really bad morning, the kinds of ones where like I was doing the silent crying, silent screaming kind of thing. I think I hugged my pillow, which I don't usually do. And I was just in a really bad way. Of course, my parents oblivious to that. And yeah, thinking a lot about the situation that I've lived in. And, you know, I won't rehash too much stuff, but one of the newer thoughts, I think, is, so I was a really good student. And, you know, like to the point of getting 100% on my maths tests and so on. And, you know, I've always been good at academic stuff. And, you know, you'd think that growing up in a reasonably good socioeconomic situation and being able to do academic stuff should have set me up for a decent life. But because of all the psychological, interpersonal stuff that I've had to deal with, I've become very broken instead. And one of the things I've thought is like, why I've lost so much motivation to do anything and just don't seem to try anymore and don't seem able to push myself. Like, clearly I have the ability in terms of like intelligence or whatever to do a lot, but I don't have the drive, and everything feels kind of hopeless and pointless. And, you know, the amount of effort I'd have to put in, I would rather just not exist. Something I was thinking about that is maybe it's partly because like I did work hard and I did do all the things I was supposed to do, and it still wasn't good enough for my parents, so why try? And so now my brain is like, there's no point doing anything because it's nothing will ever be good enough. I think maybe that's what's going on. I don't think a lot about, like, I don't consciously think, you know, are my parents going to approve? That's not a conscious thing, but I think it's probably an instinctive thing because your parents are important, and, you know, maybe something to do with attachment theory and whatever. And yeah, I just sort of was thinking about that because, you know, I would get my 100% on my tests. First time it happened, parents were like, yay, well done. The second time, oh, cool. And then if I got anything else, anything less than that, it's like, oh, why didn't you get 100? Ha, ha, ha. And sort of like, just, you know, instead of celebrating my achievements, it's like, why didn't you do that little bit extra better? And, you know, my talents weren't nurtured at all, and my parents were more interested in, well, obviously, you know, the disabled brother taking up a lot of their energy, but also my other brother being male, being into sports, he did play up a little bit more than me, so he got more attention that way, whereas I was the good girl, I was the quiet one, I just did my work, I just got through stuff, self-sufficient, they can ignore me. And also, like, the other thing is, it's not just about ignoring me, it's about saying that I'm selfish. So the disabled one, he can do basically nothing. He's not even aware that he's disabled. He doesn't really suffer unless, like, he's had an actual physical injury or he's not getting the attention that he wants. And so he has no responsibilities, gets everything handed to him, NDIS, which made his life better and my life worse because now he's around the house a lot more. We don't get respite care anymore because of the way that worked out. My parents don't like the way respite cared for him, so now he stays home all the time. And the only time I ever get a break from him now is if he's in the hospital, which doesn't happen that often. And when he does go into hospital, then mum gets super stressed and, you know, she thinks she can hide it, she can't. And it leaks out into the rest of the family. And yeah. And, you know, Dad paints me as being selfish, whereas Mikey has never had to sacrifice anything except, like, initially turning out to be disabled. That's the only real thing, whereas I've sacrificed my sanity, essentially. But I'm the selfish one, and no one really helps me do stuff. There are things that I could use help for, but because I seem like because I can speak and all that, it's just assumed that I can do everything else on my own, and I've had to do so much stuff on my own, and I think that's why I keep doing things on my own, and that's why things like, you know, when I had my Rainbow Death Ray band, it's probably why I tried to do so much of it myself and burned out, even though I could have delegated to my band members. It's just like, yeah, so much of that stuff that affects me. But yeah, so, I was going on this spiral and thinking about a whole bunch of other stuff in my life and just couldn't stop it from happening. And I think it took a long time before I drifted off, and I was only able to get maybe like 20 minutes of sleep around, say, 8:40 probably, and then just not more noise. And in terms of all this mental health stuff, like one of the very fundamental things to working on your mental health is getting enough sleep, and I can never get enough sleep. So of course I don't have the energy to do a lot of the creative things that I want to do. And I find myself going into zombie mode and playing Neopets. Like, I still am able to do some creative stuff, but not as much as I want to, not as much as I used to be able to do. He used to leave the house at 8:30, and so I could sleep from 8:30. Now he doesn't leave the house until 10. And trying to sleep after 10 doesn't work a lot of the time. You end up feeling groggy and kind of dizzy and gross. And I try not to nap during the day because that'll just make it harder for me to get to bed earlier. Sometimes I need it, but then it sort of reinforces the sleeping patterns, and I've been trying to get to bed earlier. It just doesn't happen because, like, sometimes the only time I can be productive is at night, and also sometimes at night I go into a sort of zombie mode anyway because I'm so tired that I can't even get started on my night routine, and I just feel really stuck. And my parents are pretty oblivious. Dad came to a couple of therapy sessions, then they went on a holiday, and he hasn't even mentioned anything about it since. And he certainly didn't understand any of the communication stuff my psychologist was trying to get us to do. But I think my parents did pick up that something wasn't quite right this morning because, I came out, Mum was working on a computer. She doesn't say hello or anything, doesn't really acknowledge that I'm there when I come out, so I don't bother saying anything. And then I was just looking after my dog, giving him his probiotics in the morning. And then Dad came in and he said, "How's your hay fever?" I'm the one who has the worst hay fever. And then, but neither me or Mum answered. And then he specified that he was asking Mum, and Mum was surprised because she has had some hay fever lately. She's discovered that she's experiencing hay fever, probably after decades of denial, but whatever. And yeah, so he asked her, "How's your hay fever?" Didn't really acknowledge me either. And I'm just like, because I was already in that vulnerable state, I'm like, fuck this. So I finished up with my dog, went outside, started watering my plants. And, I couldn't hear anything that they were talking about in here. But then Dad was leaving, probably to go to the gym, I don't know, while I was watering my stuff. And he comes out and tries to talk to me about my plants because I've got some azaleas with some flowers that are looking nice and whatever. And I just, I think he was coming over to say that because, like, when he said bye, I kind of didn't really say very much. I was just like, very quietly sort of like bye just to acknowledge. And so he came over and he's like, "Oh, those are looking good," trying to connect in that way, but it's like this sort of meaningless connection. It's not like, I need so much more than just a token comment about my bonsai, basically. Like, I think that child me that has become what I've become is still looking for that and not getting it, and it's sort of just like, why engage with my parents? And so I had that feeling of like, just fucking go already. But of course I can't say any of that stuff. And eventually he left. And then when I came back in and Mum was still pottering around, she'd cleaned up her stuff and I started having my breakfast. She came over and, like, she's been in a really good mood lately. She's asking me like, "What do you want for dinner?" And I think also she's been sort of like humming to herself or something, and I'm not sure if that's an awkwardness hum. I don't know if you guys do this, but like sometimes people will like feel a sense of embarrassment and then like hum to themselves or whistle to themselves or whatever. I've had it happen to me if I have a thought about something embarrassing that happened, and then I'll just be like, I don't know if that's what she was doing or if it was just like singing in her head for some other reason, but I got the sense that maybe she'd picked up on things and was a bit awkward. Japanese people are apparently a little bit more sensitive to things like body language, but don't really know how to react to it, the sort of emotional awkwardness. Anyway, like, I just picked up things about the way that she was acting and like, trying to be friendly with me. Maybe she picked up that I wasn't doing so well, and so I just, I was more polite with her than I was with Dad. But yeah, as far as I know, that's all they've picked up they've maybe picked up that something's off with me today because I'm quieter. I was up earlier than I normally would emerge, so I emerged before 10 o'clock today. And you know, that's always a sign of something. They're always a little bit, it's more bewildering if I get up at 7, but usually if I'm up at that time, I must be doing a little bit better, because otherwise I wouldn't have the energy to get up. But yeah, no, they don't really know, and they haven't asked me about my mental health in a while, and I think they don't even know, like, what would I even say? So it's just like, I'm sort of stuck in this situation where I feel like they'll say that they care about me, and, like, you know, they'll give me the food and shelter and whatever, but, like, emotionally, I don't feel like I'm cared about. I don't feel like I'm loved. And yeah, I feel like I'm always a little bit wary, because if I do something wrong, or if I don't do something that I'm expected to do, I sort of still have that feeling that I'm going to get in trouble somehow. Now, they've sort of eased up on that. I think, you know, that's probably the main thing to come out of the psychologist thing, is just realizing how serious my shit is. But that's where it stops. Like, I'm not given any extra help. I'm not really allowed to talk about things that are upsetting me. I have to be very careful when I'm in this sort of a mood, because if I express grumpiness in the wrong way, I get in trouble for that. And so instead of being sympathetic, I'm usually just told, or it's implied, that I'm being selfish or I'm the problem in some way. I'm not allowed to have these feelings. My feelings are not legitimate. I think that's probably a source of a lot of repression for me. And then, you know, I'll repress it for a certain amount of time, and then I just can't anymore, and bang, I'm fucked. Yeah. So, and I was going to talk about some other stuff, because there have been some changes in my life, but I'm a little bit less upset now, so maybe I won't go into that. Yeah, there have been some big changes in my life, and my parents really should take my condition even more seriously. But yeah, I think I won't talk about that, because this is already like 22 minutes, and because I already filmed, you know, the first attempt at making this video was about 15 minutes, and so it gets a bit hard for me to remember what I've already covered in this video when I go over that kind of stuff. And then there are a couple more false starts. Now, I'm not going to post the deleted version on Patreon this time, because a lot of it just rehashes childhood stuff. Although I did have, like, my hair was doing this sort of curve thing like they have in anime. I had this, like, one little flame kind of thing coming up. That flattened by the time I get up to this take. But yeah, no, just, so, like, you know, to summarize, I'm not doing well because Xena triggered some difficult themes for me, and, you know, it was all about physical pain and suffering, but I translated that across to my psychological pain and suffering. I am not enjoying life. I don't really have a life. I haven't enjoyed life for a long time. To some extent, is one of the more morbid thoughts, is I wish I had decided not to be alive when I first got the idea, like decided to exit, because that would have saved me a couple decades of this bullshit. You know, like that's sort of the level of morbid. I also, you know, to some extent, if we want to take it further, I kind of just wish that I hadn't been born, because that would have saved me a lot of trouble too. You know, by the time I had the idea of not existing anymore, I had already been suffering for a long time. And I had already been showing signs that things were not right with me. And it's a lot of that childhood stuff that built up to that point. And then, of course, puberty happens, your brain settles into some patterns, it does a bunch of other developmental stuff, and then you can start thinking in more of those, you know, you get into more of those entrenched patterns of morbid shit. Whereas before that, when you're a child, there's still some, you know, malleability, even though a lot of stuff happened in those crucial early years for me. But yeah, once I hit the puberty, that's when I became a lot more aware of my suffering. And it's just a shame it took me this long to figure out that my childhood was like that. Like, you know, I really should have had, things could have been really good for me just in terms of, like, my background, but because of things that happened, my parents aren't emotionally intelligent people, so, you know, throw in a disabled kid, there's not enough left to raise me. And particularly being female, which they're both sort of, you know, they're not sensitive in the way that a female would need. Like, you know, originally I would have been a more standard female and didn't have to end up like this. I mean, you know, I'm told that I was always going to be a little bit odd, but, you know, I do think being female is part of it. If I'd been male, you know, the male brain is slightly different, and also I might have been into sport and they could have connected me in that sense. But no, female, oldest child, all the expectations, you know, even though I was still really young, it's like, oh, you're the oldest, you've got to have responsibility. And I'm like 3 years old going like, what? Or probably 4 by then. You know, just, oh God, there's so much bullshit. It's so many expectations on me, and just not how you raise a happy kid who becomes well-functioning, well-adjusted adult. Yeah, bloody hell. And yeah, it's a shame it took me this long to realize that my home situation's crap, because, you know, I do think I need to move out. I finally accepted that I need to move out. The only thing is, I'm now in my mid-30s. I don't have that youthful energy. I think if I had moved out when I was, say, 18 or early 20s, you know, I still had some energy. I was also trying antidepressants and hadn't fully, you know, like I was on that one that was making me heaps skinny, but at least I was on it for a bit. You know, maybe I would have been able to move out and would have been able to learn the skills that I needed to function in that way, and then escape my parents, escape my disabled brother and the whole situation here, and maybe that would have rescued some of my life. But now it's been so long and I've run out of that path, and I feel like it's kind of too late for me to escape. Now, keeping in mind, when I was 18, I didn't know anything about the world, so I didn't even know how one moved out of home, and I still kind of don't. Like, I know you've got to go and look at rentals, and it just sounds like, you know, you have to just do so much stuff, and sounds really overwhelming. But yeah, so when I was 18, I didn't know those kinds of things. The other thing is, I think I knew less about my depression and felt certain things more intensely, and so it's entirely possible that had I moved out, it could have been worse, and I might not be alive right now. So it's kind of hard. Like, yeah, I should have done this, but on the other hand, it could have actually turned out worse, and I could have gotten into bad situations. I'll never know, but I know now, like, I'm pretty sure now I need to move out, and so I'm just going to keep buying my lottery tickets, because I don't see any other way to make it happen. I'm so damaged at this point. I can't work anymore. I just fucking can't. I can't think of a job I could do that I could stick to that would make me enough money to be that financially secure, and especially in this economy. It's just like, so today I've just been like, I don't know why I put so much effort into staying alive. I don't want to be here. Like, why? What's the point of all this? But here I am. I've still got to look after my dog. You know, I've got my band. I'm pretty sure my guitarist wouldn't be too pleased if I just quit now. Quit life, disappeared, gone, buried, whatever. Oh. Anyway, well done me not crying in this one. I've shut it off, so by the time that my parents get back home, they won't really know. Maybe I'll be able to pretend to be cheerful as well. I don't know, what am I going to do today? I thought about doing some bonsai live streams, but I just don't have the fucking energy. So I already awarded it today. I think I mentioned that's when Dad came out. Anyway, so that's just like a rant I needed to have. There's so much more I need to talk about. And I think I've already talked about, but I feel like, you know, maybe it's because I haven't had the closure. I haven't gotten any closure, so I don't feel like I've resolved things, and so I feel like I need to keep talking about the same shit. But, you know, it's taken me so long to get here. And it's a shame psychology doesn't help. Like, even with psychology, everything that I've realized on my own, not because of anything that happened in session or anything that was said in session. It's all stuff that I've figured out for myself. Or like the glass child thing was just because of YouTube, because Nervous Neuron was like, that sounds like that. And I'm like, oh shit, that is. So, you know, is YouTube better for me than therapy? That's how much the world has failed me, is I have to talk to YouTube. Shit, man. Anyway, now we're up to half an hour, so I probably could have rambled about other things. But yeah, today is not a good day. I'm hanging in there, but for how long? I fully expect, 99% chance that when I die, it's going to be my own doing, which is a depressing thought, but yeah, people don't realize how badly I'm doing because I don't tend to show it. Do all my most distressed shit alone because that's sort of what I've been trained to do. My feelings aren't valid in my own house with my own parents. And it's other people who care about me more, or other people who show they care about me more than my parents. Yeah, anyway, can't remember what I was saying, so I think that's it, and I'll try and make the next one less depressing, and it's just like, if I can never get enough sleep, and if this stuff's always going on, it's really hard to concentrate, and really hard to have the energy to do other things, and then, because I only have a window of time, a small window of time to have the place to myself, and no one ever tells me what's going on, so I don't know when my parents are coming home, so I don't know how much time I have to myself. No one keeps me in the fucking loop, so I can't plan videos that are more full on. I'm just gonna have to learn to do things when people are around, but I'm in a worse headspace than I used to be, and I think that's something that gets in the way. So yeah, I'm just super frustrated about that, and I feel super trapped, and there's nothing I can do about it. So yeah, whatever. That's it.